Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca, and this is a review that I'm super excited about. It's my review on the new Kawai ES60 entry-level portable digital piano. Why am I so excited? Well, this is finally my first review on a Kawai product. I was finally able to find one that I could rent for this review. And I'm also excited because this keyboard is actually a new entry into the market. Unlike Yamaha with their P145 or 143, or Roland with their FP10, Kawai didn't really have a true entry-level piano in that $500 price range. Kawai's ES120, which replaced the prior ES110, currently sells for about $950, which is even more than Yamaha's P225 or Roland's FP30X. They both sell for around $700, $750. So at barely over half the cost of an ES120, does the ES60 measure up? In almost every aspect, really well. You could even make a case, possibly, for comparing it to Yamaha's P225 and Roland's FP30X, but at a much lower price. We're going to get to all of the competition stuff later on in this video. For now, let's check out the Kawai ES60. Okay, so key action. The Kawai ES60 is equipped with a brand new action from Kawai, their responsive hammer light action. Now, since I have no experience with the ES110 or 120, I can't comment on how this feels relative to those pianos, but what I can say is I really like this action. It's an 88 key, fully weighted and graded hammer action with a nice matte finish on all of the key tops. I'm a big fan of lighter and responsive actions that feel smooth and easy to play quickly on, and this action is exactly that. While it doesn't actually feel the same as my personal favorite action to date, which is the Yamaha GHS or GHC actions, I find the playing experience to be similar and pretty familiar, and in a good way. The ES60's action seems to be a touch lighter feeling than the GHS, and it also feels like it's got a longer key travel, so there's more room to play expressively than with a shallower action on those Yamahas. You could say that the ES60's action is a little bit similar to one of my other favorite actions, which is the Casio PXS 1100 or 3100, in that all of these actions feel light and responsive. But the Casio ones don't feel to be as sturdy or as solidly built. They actually feel a little bit kind of bouncy to me. Roland's PHA4 triple sensor action with escapement, which is found in the FP10 and the FP30X, is technically a more advanced action, but I've always found that action to be a bit heavy for my tastes and not terribly responsive. But keep in mind, key action preferences are totally personal. So if you are familiar with and really like Roland's PHA4 action, you're probably not going to like the action on the ES60. However, if you're like me and you enjoy lighter, faster feeling responsive actions like those Yamaha or Casio actions, I think you're going to love the action on the ES60. And if you're a beginner and you don't know what kind of action you're going to like, you should probably go test out key actions for yourself from all the different brands and stores as much as you can. But for a beginner who isn't sure, I think you're going to be super happy with the action on the Kawai ES60. Now, I won't know for sure unless I can get a Yamaha keybed to test side by side against the ES60, which I am hoping to do before I have to return my rental. But I'm pretty confident that I've found my new favorite fully weighted key action. It reminds me of my previous favorite Yamaha actions in that it's a little bit on the light side, fast and responsive, fun to play. But it actually beats out those Yamaha actions, in my opinion, in a few more areas. First off, it does have that nice matte finish on all of the keys. The Yamahas tend to only have matte finish on their black keys. And the ES60 action is one of the quietest actions I've come across. According to Kawai's website, the ES60 is borrowing cushioning technology from their existing ES lineup. So I'm assuming that's how the quiet mechanical noise is being achieved. I'm just going to quickly move my mic down close to the keys and then just play so you can hear what the key action noise sounds like. And another aspect of the responsive hammer light action that really surprised me is how little the feel changes as you play closer to the pivot point, so further into the keys. Pretty much every portable digital piano I've ever tested suffers from this issue to some degree, some more than others. It's just basic physics. Think of sitting almost at the middle of a seesaw instead of at the end. So basically, as you play further into the keys and closer to the pivot point, the keys are going to be harder to press. To be honest, I've only noticed that issue while playing myself occasionally on my other digital pianos, usually if I'm playing a bigger chord that kind of requires playing further up into the keys to be able to reach it easily. But I am still a beginner. More advanced classical players do tend to notice this issue more quickly on digital pianos. Well, on the ES60, I can barely feel any difference in resistance as I do that. So I'm just going to tap on this lightly and go further up into the key. Like I'm not having to press hard up here at all. So I'm not sure how they did that, but good job, Kawai. And as I mentioned earlier, the additional key travel depth does provide the player with a little bit more room to be accurate with their dynamics and expression, but the action is still responsive enough that the extra key travel doesn't create a slow feeling or a mushy feel. So my verdict on the action on the Kawai ES60? Fabulous, especially if you prefer lighter, faster actions. Kawai really did an amazing job with the responsive hammer light action. Okay, sounds. For sounds, the Kawai ES60 has 17 built-in sounds which can be split or layered across the keyboard. There are 3 pianos, 4 electric pianos, 2 organs, 2 strings, 3 bass guitars, and then you've got a clav, harpsichord, and vibraphone. So even though 17 voices doesn't seem like a lot nowadays, for most players, all the bread and butter voices are pretty much covered. And at 192, the ES60 has a massive amount of polyphony for their piano sounds in this price range. I've never been personally good enough of a player to ever run into polyphony issues of note dropouts, even at 64 polyphony. But that extra polyphony can also help the voices sound better by providing more room for things like more detailed resonance to enhance the tone. The pianos are all sampled from the Kawai SK-EX Concert Grand Piano and use Kawai's harmonic imaging engine. Now, I know very little about actual grand pianos, but I do know that this is a very highly regarded piano, and the samples found even in the ES60 must be reflecting that because they sound really good. I'm definitely not an expert in evaluating super high quality piano samples, but I have to say, I can hear a lot of really clear detail in all of the different ranges. The bass end is bassy, but still clear and not muddy. The middle range is super clear, and even in the high end, notes aren't overly shrill or tinny, and they still have a fair bit of detail to them. Other voices I was really impressed with are the first Tyne electric piano, which is meant to be a Rhodes. It sounds really good and has a nice bite or bark to it when you play it with more velocity, which is really cool. The jazz organ isn't bad. There might be a little bit too much panning, which is meant to try and simulate a slow rotary speaker, but it still sounds good and it's totally usable. The slow strings are really nice layered with a piano. They don't build as much in volume and overpower the main voice like they tend to do on a lot of the competition. And the wood bass and the wood bass with ride cymbal are really, really good. The rest of voices are okay and nice to have, but not super impressive in my opinion. There's only one that I think could maybe do with some replacement or enhancement. But here's a demo of all of the voices on the Kawai ES60, and I'll include some splits and some layers. So, what did you think of the voices on the Kawai ES60? As I said before, I think the pianos are fantastic. The main electric piano, the slow strings, and wood basses are great. The rest are just fine, nothing spectacular, but I do think the selection that Kawai chose to include really does hit all of the bread and butter needs of most players. So good job on that, Kawai. That one voice that I really do think could maybe do with some enhancement or maybe just a replacement is the reed electric piano meant to simulate a Wurlitzer. That's the only real weak voice, in my opinion, of the ones on this piano. Okay, so the user interface. The user interface on the Kawai ES60 is very basic, pretty similar to the user interfaces on the Yamaha P145 and Roland FP10. Minimal buttons, and you need to use key combinations to do pretty much everything, including selecting voices. If you follow my channel, you know I'm not a fan of minimalist user interfaces that require key combinations, and I'm especially not a fan when you have to use key combinations even to select voices. So definitely not a huge fan of this user interface, but it is pretty much as I expected, given that this is an entry-level digital piano priced where it is at about $500 US. So if you do plan on buying a Kawai ES60, I would highly recommend that you download and make use of their piano remote app. It's a really good app, and it makes the ES60 so much easier and so much nicer and smoother to use, and it even adds some functionality. I'm going to give a brief overview on that app in just a little bit. Okay, so for using the key combinations, to select voices, you're going to hold down the sound button and then press the voice key for whichever voice you want. So one nice thing that Kawai did here is they at least labeled the categories here. It would have been nice if they labeled the individual voices within the categories, but once you've owned this keyboard for a while, you'll probably know what those are reasonably quickly anyways. So for example, right now, I'm on the default piano. I'm going to switch this to an electric piano. So I'm going to hold down sound and then press 1 for the Rhodes. Now you'll notice, okay, so I'm on the Rhodes, but you'll notice you didn't hear a sound when I selected that. Some keyboards will make a sound for the sound that you're selecting. This one doesn't, and I prefer that because I'm always thinking of this in terms of using a keyboard to perform with. And I don't want to have random sounds coming out as I'm switching voices around. So I really like that. So just as a quick example again, I'm going to switch back to the main piano, and you're not going to hear anything when I press that key. To layer voices together, you almost need a third hand, depending on what voices you want to use. To layer voices, you need to hold down the sound button. While you're doing that, you need to press the leftmost C-sharp key, so C-sharp 1, saying I want to set up layering. Still holding that sound button, you then need to simultaneously press the keys for the two sounds you want. So for example, if I wanted to take this piano and layer it with this strings, my hand's not big enough to do that. So I'm basically going to have to use my right hand to hold down that sound button and also kind of bend it around to grab the strings voice when I press this piano one. So let's give this a go. So it looks like I did it, but you can see that was more complicated than it needed to be. So hopefully Kawai can correct that in the future versions of this keyboard. And all they need to actually do is set it up the same way that you do the splits, because that's nowhere near as much of an issue. So I'm just going to hold the sound button and hit this C-sharp again to turn the layering off. Now to split, it's going to take, I'm just going to switch my main voice back to the piano again. It's going to remember what your main voice is, so all you have to do when you set up the splits is set up the extra voice that you want on the left-hand side. So for example, to do that, I'm going to hold down sound, and I'm going to press the D-sharp key to say I want to set up splits. And then, while still holding the sound button, I'm going to press the key for the voice that I want in my left hand, which is going to be this wood bass with ride cymbal, which is this key up here. So let's do that. So now I've got the bass in my left hand and piano on the right. It just remembered what the main voice was. So Kawai could have done this exact same procedure for the layering. Maybe they'll switch that because that'll make it a lot easier. Now, one thing before I move on from the splits, though, is you can't set the split point on the keyboard. You have to just accept where it is, and where it is, in my opinion, way too high up. It's all the way up at middle C, which to me is that's way too much space taken up for your left hand. If I'm going to be playing bass in my left hand and then whatever the sound is in my right, I need 2 octaves down here in the left-hand side at the most. I don't need any more. But unfortunately, you're not able to adjust that on the ES60. Okay, so I'm just going to move the camera down to the other end of the keyboard so that we can look at some of the settings that you can make down there. Okay, so to the right of the voice labels, Kawai was nice enough to include labels for at least some of the other settings that require key combinations. So the first one I'll talk about is you can hold down sound and then use these transpose up and down buttons to transpose the keyboard. So if I hold down sound and hit the plus a few times, you can see I've gone up a bunch. Now I could go down one by one, but let's say I have no idea how many times I've transposed up and I need to reset quickly. Nice features, I can hold down sound and press 0. And then I'm back to normal. So that was nicely done. And there are some other things you can do while you're holding down the sound button, but these functions aren't labeled on the keyboard. You've got to look these up in the manual. You can set the volume balance between layered voices, and you can adjust reverb settings. There's 3 kinds of reverb you can choose from, or you can just turn reverb off. And you can also adjust the touch curve between soft, medium, and hard, or just disable touch altogether and have a static touch. Just to the right of the sound button is the function button, which you can also hold down and then set a whole bunch of other things. So, for example, you've got a whole bunch of stuff to work with tempo and the metronome. I'm not going to bother demonstrating that here. It's pretty much the same as it is on every keyboard. You can choose different beats and have the the bell at the first beat, and then goes on from there, etc., and adjust the speed with these numeric settings. Or you can move the tempo up or down in increments with the plus and minus. And then to the right of that, this is how you access the rhythms. Now, I was super excited when I heard that the ES60 had rhythms, because I really like the rhythms on my Yamaha P125 and P225. However, the only way that you can access these, and there's 30 of them, and they're actually not bad rhythms. They sound good, and they're well done. But the only way you can access them is to basically cycle through them one by one. So if I hold down function and hit one of the rhythm buttons, then it's going to start and you can play along. And then I basically hold down function to go through all of these different rhythms. And like I say, they sound pretty good, and there are some good ones. There's a great variety in here, but there's no quick way to get in any of them. You just have to basically navigate to them. But at least they're there for you to practice with. Now, there are other settings that you can work with by holding down the function button that aren't labeled on the keyboard. You can look those up in the manual, things like adjusting your MIDI settings and channels, that type of thing. So I've been a bit critical of the user interface on the ES60, but given the price point, to be honest, I'm not really being fair. Other pianos at this price point of about $500 like the Yamaha P145 and the Roland FP10, also rely heavily on key combinations. They both require key combinations to select voices, and those two pianos can't split voices or play back any rhythms without connecting them to an app first. So the ES60 does have them both outclassed there. Although Kawai really does need to address that finger pretzel issue with layering voices though. But at the $500 US price point, the ES60's user interface is on par with the competition. But all that being said, that now brings me to the Kawai app Piano Remote, which is available for both Android and iOS, and I would highly recommend that you make use of this if you're going to go ahead with a Kawai ES60. Okay, so this isn't going to be an in-depth demo of this app. I'm just going to show you a few things really quickly that will really help you out with using your ES60. And I'll also point out a couple of bits of functionality that the app actually adds that the piano doesn't have without the app. So first off, I'm using my iPad for this demo, but it is available for iPad or Android. And just a quick FYI, when you're using the app and it's connected, if you use any of those key combinations that we were demonstrating before, that's going to disconnect you from the app. Not really a big deal to me though, because the whole point of using the app is so you don't have to do the key combinations. So it opens up in this piano menu, but I'm going to click on Sounds. And when I see that, then all of the sounds that are on the keyboard pop up. So I can switch nice and quickly and easily from the piano to the Rhodes electric piano to the jazz organ, etc. So much quicker, much easier, and much more intuitive than using the key combinations. If I click on the arrow at the bottom here, then this menu is going to open up, and you can do all sorts of stuff with this menu. So for example, you can even navigate to different sounds right within here. There's category buttons up at the top. So right now I'm on the piano ones, so I can navigate to the different piano sounds, or I can go to the electric pianos and navigate to those in there, etc. But here's where it gets really nice. Remember how challenging it was to set up dual sounds or layers? With this one, I just press dual. This pops open. So now I've got my electric piano and the strings. And I can just choose whatever voice I want for the dual. Let's say instead of the slow strings, I want to have the string ensemble. Super cool. But the strings are kind of loud. Well, look what I can do. I can adjust the relative balance nice and easy right here from the same menu between the two layered voices. So that's awesome. And same thing for the splitting of voices. If I go to split, then I'm going to have it's going to default to one of the basses. I've got the electric bass on here. And I can choose whatever voice I want within that category, or with the voices at the top, you can pick a different category if you wanted to have it in the left hand. I'll do the electric bass this time. And you can adjust the relative volume balance just like you could with the dual. So I could, let's see, beef up the bass here. But the really cool thing, remember with the piano itself, you couldn't set the split point. It defaults way up here. So I'm still on bass here, and I don't get piano until C4, right in the middle of the keyboard, which to me is a little bit kind of goofy. So I'm going to move this down at least one octave here. I'll go to B2, so now the bass stops there. So now, if I wanted to play down that low with the piano, I've got access to it. So super nice and super easy to use. Now something else to mention is, let's say I've got this set up just the way that I want it, and I want to save it. Well, there's a basic registration memory system built in here. This little icon in the bottom right-hand corner that's kind of like a little arrow allows me to save this sound. I'll call it T-bass. Click on save. And now when I'm back out at the sound menu for choosing a sound, there's this user button up here. So I can click on user and you can see I've got T-bass. So I can choose that. And then it's like basically like a registration memory system that's built into the app. That's super useful. Now there's also a basic song recorder built in here, and you can record songs. You can set this up in the menu system as MIDI or audio. The audio choice is kind of interesting to me. The keyboard sounds must be saved within the app to be able to do that because there's no audio connection here. But either way, it's super basic, and I'm actually not going to bother demoing that in this quick overview here. The only other thing to really mention is there is a menu up in the top right where you can set that recording preferences, speaker preferences, MIDI choices, that type of thing. And there's also a link to the manual if you need it for the app. So that's just a quick overview of this app. It's been really stable and rock solid when I've been using it. So Kawai did a great job on this. It's super easy to use, and you can do pretty much everything you need to do within that one menu, which is awesome. Now you can also access the metronome in here, which I'm not going to bother demonstrating because that's pretty standard. The one thing I really wish that this app had, and I was kind of surprised it didn't, I was expecting to see a list of the rhythms so that I could choose a rhythm and by name, and as opposed to having to cycle through them one by one like you have to do using the keyboard. But unfortunately, that's not in this app. Hopefully they'll add that to it one day. But if you are going to go ahead with a Kawai ES60, I would highly recommend downloading this app because I think you're going to find it much easier to use and much more enjoyable to use using the app instead of the onboard user interface. Okay, so connectivity. When I first started looking into the Kawai ES60 and doing some research on it, I was really excited to hear about some of the connectivity that was included. But then I noticed that there's a really important bit of connectivity that's included on almost every other keyboard or digital piano that I've ever tested, even on cheap $100 keyboards, that's missing on the ES60. And in all honesty, I haven't heard a single reviewer mention this yet. All I could say to myself was, Kawai, why did you do that? You were so close. I should note right away, though, one of the only other keyboards I know of that also suffers from this issue is the Roland FP10, which is one of the Kawai ES60's main competitors. So before getting to the super good and super bad items, I'll quickly go over the other stuff. For headphones, there's a 1/4 inch stereo headphone out, which is thankfully on the front of the piano. I really wish all keyboards would start doing that instead of having them on the back. So that's a good job there, Kawai. Then on the back, we have a 1/4 inch sustain pedal port, which is compatible with half pedaling if you buy the optional Kawai F10H pedal. The ES60 comes with just a basic plastic brick style switch pedal for sustain. Then we have a USB to host port for connecting the ES60 to a device. The unfortunate thing about this connection is that unlike newer releases from the competition, this port only transmits MIDI. It has no built-in audio interface, so it does not also transmit audio. As a result, you cannot send digital audio directly to a phone to easily record a video. You can't send audio directly to a DAW app on a device to record audio tracks, nor can you stream audio from your device back into the ES60 speakers or headphones to play along with as an audio input source. So what's the connectivity feature that Kawai included that I was surprised and really excited about? Kawai included proper 1/4 inch left and right line out ports for connecting to external audio equipment like amps, PA systems, mixers, and audio interfaces. This is a feature that is almost always left out of entry-level digital pianos like the Yamaha P145 and Roland FP10 that makes the Kawai ES60 a much better choice for performing with. Without those ports, you have to use the headphone out instead, which can work, but it's got multiple issues and it's not ideal. This feature means that gigging musicians can consider using the ES60 as a super low-budget stage piano and take advantage of those great piano sounds and really good action. When I first heard the ES60 had line outs, I even started wondering, can you be comparing the ES60 to the P225 from Yamaha or the Roland FP30X? More on that later. But regardless, this is a fantastic feature to have in an entry-level digital piano from a big manufacturer, so great job, Kawai. Now what about Bluetooth? Well, the Kawai ES60 does not have any Bluetooth functionality. There's no Bluetooth MIDI out, and there is no Bluetooth audio in for streaming in external audio from a device. So that's it for connectivity on this piano, and that brings me to, at least in my opinion, a massive missing feature on the Kawai ES60. There is no auxiliary in port. So that means there is no way to stream audio from a device into the Kawai ES60 speakers and headphones. There are lots of keyboards out there that don't have a built-in audio interface or Bluetooth audio in, and those are both alternatives for streaming in external audio. But virtually all of those will at least include an auxiliary in port so that you can connect a cable and stream in audio from a device like an iPad to play along with. Notable exception, as I mentioned earlier, is the Roland FP10, which also cannot stream in external audio. So what does this mean? Well, as a result, you cannot connect a device to your ES60 and hear any audio from that device through the ES60 speakers or headphones if you've got your headphones connected to the piano. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced player and you want to be able to hear online piano lessons, jam along with YouTube videos, play over top of backing tracks, etc. through your piano speakers or headphones, you're not going to be able to do that with the ES60. Now, it's not impossible. You just need to also get a mixer or speaker or something with multiple channels and a headphone port of some sort and some cables. You would connect the ES60 from its left and right line out ports to the mixer, and then also connect your device, so your iPad, for example, to that mixer. Then you can mix the two signals together and then plug your headphones into the mixer and listen to everything that way altogether. And it doesn't have to be expensive. You can get a really basic mixer and two 1/4 inch instrument cables from Amazon for as little as $50. As an example, I reviewed the really inexpensive Mookie mixers a while back, and they would take care of this just fine. So it's not the end of the world by any stretch, but it's just kind of a monstrous oversight by Kawai in my opinion. So my verdict on the Kawai ES60's connectivity features, well, there's some really good and some bad there. But how important should those issues be in your buying decision? To be honest, like I said, the lack of audio in options is perplexing to me, but it's not the end of the world, and for $50, $60, you can get rid of that as an issue. For me, since I play in bands, the line out ports are way more important, and I have lots of mixers and cables lying around that would allow me to hear everything together through a set of headphones or speakers. So a little bit annoying, but like I said, not the end of the world and not a huge deal. I just would place way more value on those line out ports. For someone who only wants to play at home and isn't planning on gigging or making audio recordings in a DAW app, the lineouts aren't as important. Just be aware that if you want to play along with audio from your iPad or phone and hear them together through your headphones, you're going to need to get some additional equipment to do that. If you don't want to have to do that, then you're going to be looking at the competition instead. Okay, speakers. When we get to talking about the speakers on the Kawai ES60, we're back to saying wow again. The speakers on the ES60 are really, really good and surprisingly powerful. The ES60 has two 12-centimeter full-range speakers with 10 watts of power each for a total of 20 watts. Now, the speaker grills are on the bottom, and I have never been a fan of speakers that aren't directed towards the player. Manufacturers and reviewers will often say the sound bounces off the floor and creates this wonderful listening experience. That's never been my experience with downward-facing speaker openings. I've always preferred they face the player. Well, Kawai surprised me again. These speakers are easily the best-sounding speakers I've experienced in a portable digital piano. They're super powerful, they're super clear, they never distort, and I don't know if there's some sound sneaking out through the case that does face the player, but if I was blindfolded, I would totally think there were speaker grills or vents or something on top because they just sound awesome. And given the line out ports on this piano, you can choose to have the speakers enabled as extra personal monitors at a performance while using the line outs to connect to the PA system. And these speakers are actually loud enough, you can probably hear them as monitors. When I used to play gigs with my Yamaha CK88, I just turned the 12-watt speakers completely off because they were totally impossible to hear. I should also mention that the ES60 includes an EQ option where you can specify table or normal. This is a nice feature to have for pianos that have the speaker grills on the bottom. If your piano isn't on an open stand like I've got here and is sitting on like a table, then you can adjust the EQ to help make it sound better. Here's a quick demo of the speakers on the Kawai ES60, just as picked up by the built-in mic on my iPhone. Okay, some other features to mention on the Kawai ES60. For effects, there's 3 types of reverb, or you can just turn reverb off. There are 15 voice demo songs. I never listened to those. In addition to Kawai's piano remote app, the ES60 is also compatible with their Pia Book player app, which has a bank of songs you can learn and see sheet music for, etc. I didn't bother looking at that app at all for this review. You can manually adjust tuning up or down by half a hertz if you needed to tune slightly to match an acoustic instrument, for example. And there's a nice big sturdy music rest that's included. It can hold a tablet very easily, or if you're into books, a big, huge, heavy book. So what's missing or could be improved? For an entry-level piano from a major manufacturer like Kawai with a fantastic fully weighted and graded hammer key action, really high-quality piano sounds, and proper left and right line-out ports for gigging musicians at only $500 US, it's pretty hard to complain much about that. As you can probably guess, my one main issue is that lack of ability to stream in external audio. But as I mentioned earlier, you can fix that yourself with a cheap mixer, spend about $50 or so, and then you're good to go. But it would be nice, Kawai, if you did address this issue so people didn't have to do that. Whatever the cheapest and easiest thing is to add, whether it's an auxiliary in port, Bluetooth audio in, or an audio interface built into the USB to host port, please, Kawai, do one of those things in future versions of this keyboard. It would really be a big difference. But beyond all of that, would I love a fancier user interface? As I mentioned at $500 US, it is on par with the competition, and Kawai has provided a really good and really solid app in Piano Remote. I really like that app. And that makes up for the simple UI. A couple things that would be nice to see Kawai address, or maybe enhance just a little bit though. Label the individual instruments on the front panel as opposed to just the categories. Fix that finger pretzel issue for layering. Just to make it work like the split feature does would be an easy solution. You could select your main voice first, and then select your layered voice. And the weakest voice on this keyboard is that reed electric piano meant to mimic a Wurlitzer. This voice could really do with even a minor enhancement or upgrade. But once again, for the incredibly low price of $500 US, even without the audio in option, the Kawai ES60 is still a fantastic value for money. Okay, so the competition. The main competitors to the Kawai ES60 would definitely be the Yamaha P145 and Roland FP10 pianos. All three currently sell for about $500 US. Some might say the Casio PXS 1100 should also be a competitor, but it's priced kind of high nowadays at $670 US. I would never recommend that Casio over any of those other three. So the Kawai ES60 versus the Yamaha P145. If you follow my channel, you know that I'm a huge Yamaha fan, but I've got to say, I think the Kawai ES60 outdoes the Yamaha P145 in every category but one, at least in my opinion. Now, sounds and key action are personal preferences, but in my opinion, the ES60 not only has more sounds, it has better piano sounds and better key action, and it slaughters the P145 in polyphony. And the ES60 has those left and right line out ports, which I feel is a massive feature to include at this price point. Both pianos have very basic user interfaces, but they both alleviate that with really good applications, which I highly recommend using for either one. As far as speakers go, there's no comparison. The Kawai ES60 speakers are the best I've heard from a portable digital piano, and they totally outperform the P145s. The only thing that lands in the P145's favor is the audio interface built into the USB to host port. that not only allows you to stream audio into the piano, which you cannot do with the ES60, but it also allows you to send high-quality digital audio out to a device like a phone or a tablet to easily make piano performance videos or record audio tracks in a DAW app. So for me, between these two, it's an easy choice. I'd highly recommend the Kawai ES60 to get those better piano sounds, better key action, once again in my opinion, and the left and right line out ports, and I would just live with needing a mixer and some cables for my practice sessions. Okay, how about comparing the Kawai ES60 against the Roland FP10? The real big difference here is the key action, which, as I've mentioned many times, is totally personal, as are the sound engines. The FP10 uses Roland's super popular PHA4 action, which is a fully weighted and graded triple sensor action. I personally have never been a fan of that action, but many people love the PHA4 action, and it's very different than the action on the Kawai ES60, which is, in my opinion, lighter, faster, and more responsive. Now, as I continue this comparison, the only reason that I think you should even consider the FP10 over the Kawai ES60 is if you really like that PHA4 action. Otherwise, in my opinion, the Kawai beats out the FP10 in pretty much every other area. Sounds on both are very good. My preference is with the Kawai, but again, that's a personal choice. Apart from the personal preferences of key action and sounds, the Kawai ES60 has those left and right line out ports that are missing on the FP10. It has a much better companion app, and neither keyboard actually has the ability to stream in external audio. The FP10 is one of the only other keyboards I know of that shares this issue. And once again, the Kawai ES60 speakers totally blow away the speakers on the FP10. So for me, given that I prefer the action on the ES60, the left and right line out ports, and the better speakers, this is a super easy choice for me. I would take the Kawai ES60 over the FP10 every time. Now, something I mentioned earlier on in this video is, what about the Yamaha P225 at $750 US or the Roland FP30X at $700 US? When I first heard the Kawai ES60 had those left and right line out ports, and they've got those drum rhythms, I started wondering, can the ES60 compete with the Yamaha P225 or the Roland FP30X? Well, yes, kind of, mostly because it's significantly cheaper. The Yamaha P225 does have a far better user interface, far better than the Roland FP30X as well. That user interface isn't much better than the Kawai's, to be honest. And the P225's rhythms also have the option of bass accompaniment, but there's that one issue: there's no way to stream audio into the Kawai ES60 to play along with. Both the Yamaha P225 and the Roland FP30X have audio interfaces built into their USB ports, so that solves both the audio streaming issue and also offers some additional functionality like sending audio to your devices for videos or recordings. So my opinion, if money's not an object, then the Yamaha P225 I think is worth the extra $250 in the long run for the better user interface and the built-in audio interface. But if money is a little bit tight, I would be totally fine with the Kawai ES60 and would live with needing a mixer for audio streaming. As far as the Roland FP30X is concerned, I would actually take an ES60 even over the FP30X simply because I'm not a fan of the PHA4 action. And the FP30X user interface isn't really much better than the Kawai ES60s anyways. So the final verdict on the Kawai ES60, with high-quality piano sounds, massive polyphony, a fantastic key action, a great companion app, and the added bonus of left and right line out ports, the Kawai ES60 is a fantastic choice at only $500 US and highly, highly recommended. So that's pretty much it for this video. As always, I've left links below to products I've mentioned here so that you can check out current prices in your area, as well as some links to other relevant reviews of mine, and also some links to some online piano training that worked really well for me that I can highly recommend. So thanks again for stopping by, and happy piano shopping. Have an awesome day.